Welcome to Whispers in the Dark episode 2. We played hide and seek in a forest where people go missing. Chapter 1. The argument had been vibrating through the thin walls of the bedroom since 3 in the afternoon. Maya stood in front of the mirror, aggressively blending a streak of glitter across her cheekbones. She was 19, all sharp edges and restless energy, wearing an oversized graphic tee she intended to knot at the waist and a pair of scuffed combat boots. To her, the wilderness camp party on the edge of the Blackwood Ridge was the only thing that mattered this weekend. It was the last big bonfire before the college semester took everyone away. Being paranoid, Chloe, Maya said, her voice dropping into that familiar, condescending roll. It's just the ridge. Everyone goes up there. Chloe sat on the edge of the unmade bed, her knees pulled tightly to her chest. She was 20 a year older, but today she felt like the fragile one. She hadn't even changed out of her gray sweatpants. People don't just go up there, Maya. Did you completely forget the news reports from last month? That hiker from the state college. They found his truck by the trailhead, but nothing else. That makes 3 people in 2 years. There is something wrong with those woods. Yeah, he bad orientation skills and cheap whiskey, Maya scoffed, snapping a rubber band around her wrist. Look, Brandon is driving. He's already on his way. I told him you were coming. So if you back out now, I'm stuck sitting in the front seat of his truck listening to him talk about his suspension for 45 minutes alone. Just come. Sit by the fire. Read a book on your phone. I don't care. Just don't make me look like a loser who can't even convince her own sister to touch grass. Chloe stared at the floorboards. She hated Brandon. She hated the way he drove, the way he laughed at things that weren't funny, and the way Maya shrank her own intelligence just to fit into his passenger seat. But that was exactly why she couldn't let Maya go alone. If Brandon got drunk, which he always did, or if Maya got too reckless, someone needed to have the keys. Someone needed to be the anchor. Fine, Chloe muttered, standing up with a heavy sigh. But we leave by midnight. No exceptions. Maya grinned, the tension evaporating instantly as she threw her arms around Chloe's neck. Deal. Go put on some real pants. Chapter 2. The ridge and the drifting smoke by 10 o'clock. The clearing at Blackwood Ridge was in chaotic blur of bass, wood smoke, and the sour smell of stale beer. Brandon's truck had rattled up the logging road an hour late, the bed of the vehicle filled with loose firewood and 3 coolers of cheap cider. The moment the tires hit the dirt lot, Brandon had hopped out, leaving the headlights on and the engine running for a solid 3 minutes before Maya reached over to click the ignition off. Whoa, the ridge, Brandon yelled into the night air, already cracking a silver can open before his boots even fully broke the mud. Chloe stepped out of the back seat, her hands jammed deep into the pockets of her denim jacket. The cold was different up here. It didn't just sit on the skin, it crept into the joints, heavy with the dampness of the surrounding pines. The forest didn't feel like a backdrop for a party, it felt like an audience. The trees stood massive and ancient, their upper branches woven together so tightly they completely choked out the moonlight. As the hours bled together, the party began to fracture. A crowd of about 30 people had dwindled as the temperature dropped. Maya was in her element, floating between groups, her laughter loud and brittle over the thumping music coming from someone's portable tailgate speaker. Chloe kept her distance, sitting on an overturned log near the edge of the light, her eyes tracking Brandon. He was a disaster. By 11, he was slurring his words, leaning heavily against the hood of his truck while trying to explain a football play to a guy who wasn't listening. Hey, a soft voice said, breaking Chloe out of her trance. It was Sarah, Maya's closest friend from high school, holding a paper cup of lukewarm water. She looked just as miserable as Chloe. Maya's not going to want to leave anytime soon, is she? I told her midnight, Chloe said, checking her phone. 11:45 p.m. I'm going to go find her. But by the time Chloe navigated the muddy clearing to the far side of the bonfire, Brandon's truck was gone. Chloe stood frozen, staring at the empty space between the pines where the black Silverado had been parked. She ran back to the log, grabbing Sarah, and then tackled Maya by the shoulder, pulling her away from a conversation. Where's Brandon? Chloe demanded. Maya blinked, her eyes glassy. What? He went to get more ice from the gas station down the hill, like 20 minutes ago. Maya, his truck isn't just gone, he took his coolers. He took his jacket, Chloe said, her voice rising with an edge of pure panic. He was completely wasted, he forgot us. Maya reached into her pockets, her hands suddenly frantic. She pulled out her phone. I'll call him, he's probably fine. She pressed the screen. A second later, her face dropped. No service, nothing. The bars are totally dead. Chapter 3, the silence of the clearing. By 2 in the morning, the party had completely died. The last car, a beat-up sedan full of sophomores who didn't have room for 3 extra passengers, had roared down the logging road, their taillights disappearing into the mist like twin red eyes. The music had stopped when the speaker battery died, leaving an absolute suffocating silence in its wake. The clearing was a graveyard of plastic cups, crushed cans, and the smoldering red eye of the dying bonfire. Only 3 people remained: Chloe, Maya, and Sarah. They were huddled together on the single dry log, a single flashlight beam cutting a pathetic yellow line through the darkness. The air had turned bitter, every breath visible in the pale light. He's not coming back, Sarah whispered, her teeth chattering violently. She was wearing nothing but a thin hoodie. He's probably passed out in his bed at home by now. We're stuck here until morning. Can walk the logging road, Chloe said, her voice tight. It's 6 miles to the highway. The dark, without boots. Maya looked down at Sarah's canvas sneakers, already soaked through with gray mud. We'll break an ankle in the ruts. The fog is too thick anyway. We can't see 5 feet in front of us on the trail. Silence pressed in again. It was a heavy, living thing. Every snap of a twig in the deep brush felt magnified, echoing off the invisible canopy above. The stories Chloe had tried to warn Maya about earlier now felt incredibly loud. 3 people missing. No tracks. No signs of a struggle. Just gone. We need to stay awake, Maya said suddenly, her voice high and forced, trying to shatter the dread settling over them. If we sit here and freeze, we're going to lose our minds. Let's do something. Let's play a game. Sarah looked up. Face pale. A game? Are you serious, Maya? It's 2 a.m. in the middle of a missing persons hotspot. Exactly. Let's play hide and seek, Maya insisted, a manic edge to her grin. She was trying to force the terror down, using nostalgia as a shield. Just in the clearing, no going into the deep trees. 1 person counts by the fire, the other 2 hide. It'll keep us moving. It'll keep us warm until the sun comes up. Chloe looked at her sister. She saw the hidden terror behind Maya's wide eyes. Maya wasn't being stupid anymore. She was terrified, trying frantically to keep them from staring into the dark until they screamed. Fine, Chloe said softly. I'll count first. 60 seconds. If you go past the tree line, I'm leaving you out there. Chapter 4, The Seeker in the Dark. Chloe leaned her forehead against the rough bark of a massive pine near the dying embers. She closed her eyes. 1, 2, 3. The sound of Maya and Sarah's footsteps crunching through the dry pine needles was loud at first, then rapidly faded into the soft, damp moss further out. 45, 46, 47. As the numbers clicked away in her head, Chloe realized the forest had changed. The normal sounds, the distant hoot of an owl, the wind rustling the high pines, had completely ceased. The air felt thick, charged with static, like the moments right before a lightning strike. 59, 60. Ready or not, here I come. Chloe turned around, pulling her small flashlight from her pocket. She clicked it on. The beam was weak, the battery draining from the cold. It illuminated the ghost-white trunks of the birch trees and the dark, tangled shapes of the blackberry brambles. Maya, she called out, keeping her voice low. Sarah, come on, I can hear you. She didn't hear them, but she heard something else, a heavy, wet drag, like something large being pulled through the high ferns. Chloe stopped, her heart slamming against her ribs. She swerved the flashlight beam toward the sound, about 30 yards out, right past the perimeter they had agreed on. The light caught something metallic, a large, rusted iron trap. No, it was a buckle. The light traveled up. A pair of heavy, mud-caked rubber hunting boots. A canvas coat stained so dark with old grease it looked black. And then a face. The man was standing perfectly still behind a thick curtain of hemlock branches. He didn't have a flashlight. He didn't have a weapon visible, but his arms were unnaturally long, his hands hanging loose at his sides. His face was weathered, his eyes completely hollow under the brim of a stained cap. He wasn't looking at Chloe. He was looking at the trail where Sarah had run, Chloe's breath caught in her throat. The rumors weren't rumors. The missing people weren't lost. The man took a step forward, completely silent, his body moving with an unnatural, fluid grace through the dense brush. He didn't look like an intruder in the woods. He looked like he belonged to them. Chloe didn't scream. She knew instantly that a scream would bring Maya running out of her hiding spot, straight into the open. Instead, she dropped to her knees, slipping into the shadow of a large rotten log, clicking her flashlight off. Chapter 5. The game changes through the dark. Chloe heard a sharp, stifled gasp from the western edge of the clearing. Sarah. Then came a sound that didn't belong to a childhood game. A wet, heavy thud, followed by the sound of fabric tearing. Sarah didn't even have time to yell. There was only a brief, frantic rustle of leaves, and then that horrific, heavy dragging sound resumed. Chloe crawled through the mud, her hands scraping against sharp rocks and pine needles, ignoring the pain. Her adrenaline was a roaring fire in her veins. She reached the spot where she had seen Maya head. "Maya," Chloe hissed into the dark, her voice a bare vibration. "Maya, get down." A hand reached out from a hollowed-out tree root, grabbing Chloe's jacket. Maya pulled her sister down into the dirt beside her. Maya was trembling so hard her teeth were clicking together. "I saw him," Maya whispered, her voice cracked with tears. He has Sarah. Chloe, he has a knife, it's huge. He's putting her in the back of a canvas tarp." "She alive?" "I don't know," Maya sobbed, the glitter on her face now smeared with mud and real tears. "I don't know, what do? We can't run." "He's too fast." Chloe looked around the dark hollow. Her eyes had adjusted to the deep blackness now. The fear that had paralyzed her for the last 5 hours suddenly broke, replaced by a cold, feral clarity. Brandon wasn't coming. No one was coming. The forest didn't care about them. If they ran, they would become numbers 4 and 5 on the evening news. "We don't run," Chloe said, her voice dropping into a register Maya had never heard from her before. It was steady. "Dead." "He thinks we're playing a game. He thinks we're the ones hiding." Chloe reached out and felt the ground until her fingers wrapped around a heavy, jagged piece of limestone, a leftover chunk from the old logging fire pits. It was cold, heavy, and sharp on one side. She handed it to Maya. "Take this," Chloe whispered. Then Chloe reached into her own denim jacket pocket. Her fingers wrapped around the only tool she had, a heavy tire iron she had pulled from Brandon's loose truck toolbox earlier in the night when she was checking the bed. She had forgotten it was still in her deep pocket. It was a foot-long, solid iron with a hooked wedge end. "When he comes for us," Chloe said, staring directly into her sister's eyes, "you don't look away. You hit him until he stops moving." Chapter 6. The unraveling the heavy rubber boots crunched slowly through the brush, approaching the hollow tree root. The murderer was patient. He had done this before. He liked the hunt, the way the city kids froze like deer when the dark finally swallowed them. He moved the hemlock branches aside with his left hand, the long hunting knife in his right catching the faint, dying glow of the distant bonfire embers. He leaned down, peering into the dark hollow of the roots where he could hear the faint, ragged breathing of his next prize. He reached his hand in. A hand shot out of the darkness, not weak, not trembling, and grabbed his wrist with a vice-like grip. It was Chloe. Before the man could register the resistance, Chloe used his own momentum to yank him forward, pulling his balance down into the dirt. With her other hand, she brought the iron wedge of the tire iron down with everything she had, striking him squarely across the collarbone. The man let out a guttural, choked roar, his knife flashing in the dark as he slashed wildly. The blade caught Chloe across the forearm, tearing through her denim jacket and slicing open the skin. But Chloe didn't let go. She slammed her body weight over his chest, pinning his knife arm against the dirt. "Now, Maya," Chloe screamed. From the shadow of the roots, Maya exploded outward. The terror that had consumed her all night turned into pure, kinetic rage. She brought the jagged piece of limestone down with both hands, striking the man across the side of the face. The rock hit with a sickening, heavy crunch. The man stunned, his grip loosening on the knife. The sisters didn't hesitate. They didn't stop to ask if he was conscious. They didn't pause to see if he was done. They were two bodies moving with a single, desperate instinct. Chloe rained the iron rod down onto his chest and shoulders, while Maya struck again and again with the stone. Their breathing ragged, their faces sprayed with the hot, metallic reality of what they were doing. In the dark of the Blackwood Ridge, the hunter became the floor. The struggle lasted less than 2 minutes, but it felt like a century. Slowly, the thrashing beneath them stopped. The man's long arms went slack in the mud. The heavy knife slipped from his fingers, sinking into the moss. The only sound left in the woods was the frantic, sobbing gasps of the two sisters. Chapter 7. The long walk home. The sun didn't rise with a dramatic flash. It arrived as a slow, miserable gray wash through the thick pine needles of the ridge. By 5 a.m., the fog had begun to lift, turning the deep woods into a series of pale, ghostly silhouettes. Chloe stood at the edge of the logging road, her denim jacket torn to shreds. the left sleeve soaked through with dark, tacky blood from the slash on her arm. Her face was patterned with dark drops that had dried in the cold morning air. She was holding the tire iron loose at her side, the metal tip stained a deep, horrific crimson. Beside her, Maya looked unrecognizable. The glitter on her cheeks was completely gone, replaced by a mask of gray mud and dark splatter. Her combat boots were ruined, caked in dirt, but her grip on Chloe's hand was unbreakable. Behind them, wrapped in the killer's own canvas tarp, Sarah was sitting on the logging ruts. She was bruised, her collarbone dislocated, but she was breathing. They had pulled her from the brush before the cold could finish what the man had started. The three of them didn't look back at the clearing. They didn't look back at the spot beneath the hollow roots where the dark shape lay still in the moss. They began the 6-mile walk down the mountain toward the highway, their boots crunching heavily in the mud, leaving a trail of dark, wet footprints behind them as they stepped out of the woods and into the cold, honest light of day.